Do you really like challenges?
Challenges is actually what keeps me awake at night. If I would have continued in Airtel, I would have had a far more comfortable life than what I've done in the last 7 years. But that's not what a personality is who would want to take up new challenges. Because the amount of exposure that I've got in the last 7 years is at least 10x more.
In this episode of Doers Goes to India, we are joined by Jagnoor Singh, professional with one of India's most dynamic careers. From Telecom at Airtel to hospitality at OYO, EdTech at Unacademy, and now HealthTech as COO at Practo.
First is, I think, very important to understand what is your why. If your why is challenges, if your why is the problem that you're solving for, you'll figure out a way to solve the problem.
People don't leave companies, they leave leaders. How do you identify a good leader versus a great leader?
So while leaders might not be the reason why you leave one place, but leaders will always be one of the reasons why you join a new place.
This episode goes beyond career talk. It's about leadership, discipline, and the moments of courage that define who you become.
There is this principle that we say, which is a 90s to 10 principle. It says that 10% of your life depends upon what happened to you. 90% depends upon how you reacted to that situation.
Watch the full episode and let the lesson of risk-taking, learning, and reinvention empower you.
The most important thing to achieve is to not to be insecure as a leader.
How do you define a good problem? What's the metrics? It has to be big enough to be good?
Two things. One,
this episode is strengthened by Hama Steel and insured by Himalayan Everest Insurance. Hi everyone, I'm back again with another podcast here in Bangalore. Yeah, trying to cover as many good people as I can. That too many good people, and I'm here again with amazing personality today. Let's welcome him without any further delay. Hi Jagnoor.
hey, Anu, thanks a lot for having me over.
Thanks a lot for making time. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure is all mine.
And I don't know if I will be able to do justice to this podcast because you have so much of experience, and I'll try to extract as many things as possible for our audience today.
No, it's too humble for you to say that. I've been going through your podcast. I think the range that you've covered over the years is something really look forward to.
So my first question would be, do you really like challenges?
I think challenges is actually what keeps me awake at night. And if you look at the journey for the last 16 years now, every few years, that's what I look up to. Because they're different people, right? Different people, different things give them a kick. Something that gives me kick in life is to pick up challenges and solve for that. So a one-word answer to that, challenge is what keeps me alive, keeps me awake at night.
Because the reason I asked you that question was, I was going around your profile, and then I saw telecommunication, then I saw hospitality, then I saw EdTech, then I saw EdTech, then I saw FMCG. These are career trajectory for 5 different people, and seems like you have covered it all, and then you are pretty successful at each of these. Was this very organic transition between all these major industries, or you were quite peculiar about, okay, by this year I should be jumping into this industry, and by that year I should be jumping into that industry?
I think what is even important here to understand is not just whether you made a transition from one industry to another, is what is the source for success? Or even success could be a very big word, but let's say if you want to do good in a new industry, what are the key ingredients? First is, I think, very important to understand what is your why. Why would you change from one role to another or one industry to another? And I think that's what I answered before this. If your why is challenges, if your why is the problem that you're solving for, you'll figure out a way to solve the problem. If the why could be anything which is more transactional, you see people struggle. But the why is that you really like the problem that you're getting into, right? And we could talk when we discuss journey is, let's say when I joined OYO, one of the things was wanting to set up a cloud kitchen business across the country. The challenge was big enough. The problem was worth solving for. Then once you get into it, you give it your all. Then you don't give yourself a plan B. You say you'll do it whatever it takes to solve that problem in. And second is, I think one thing which I feel is very overhyped of saying you can only be in one industry and go deeper. You can only one industry and solve. What I've realized over the last years is the core leadership principles remain very same. So it might be hospitality, EdTech, or healthcare or telecom. If you do your basics right in leadership, if you have that first principle thinking, you can solve the problem irrespective of the industry or the geography that you are in.
No, again, reframing the same question. 8 plus years in telcos, right? And with that much of investment already, you already know the senior leaders, you already have an access, you already understand the industry, you are already at a competitive age against your colleague. And then for a sane mind, it would be okay. 8 years, I will make sure that I reach within the same industry. And then because going another industry would be like, it's not similar to starting from the scratch, but again, new people, the comfort zone, how the colleagues would be, will I succeed or not, because I've already have a good reputation back home, back in this industry. It would be quite for a lack of a better word, shameful to come back to the same industry because I could not perform or to the industry that I went to. Whatever you say it, right? I mean, like, are you understanding me?
I think not just understanding you, I think you're even answering half of the question while you frame the question is. And why I say that is two things, right? One, let me talk it in two parts. What did those 9 years give to me? And second, why the change? First of all, I think it's very important in a career to have a very, very strong base. And the base is not for some of the things that you know seniors, you know the industry, etc. But I think I'm really blessed that I started off my career in Airtel. And whatever I have achieved in my life, I give a lot of credit to the leaders over there, the way they groom talent. So out of campus, when I joined Airtel, we were part of a leadership program, which is, we call it management trainees from the industries. We used to call it young leaders program in Airtel. But what it did was that it shaped your career in a way that every 1.5 years, you used to do a very cross-functional role, which could mean you do a sales role for 1.5 years, you might be a good sales guy, and your next role is diagonally opposite into marketing. And your next role could be clearly strategy or on ground. Not just that, you might start your career in Bihar, your next role is north, and the next role is west. As a result, what happens is it really grooms you as a leader. One, you're not someone who will say, oh, I'm a sales expert or I'm a marketing expert. You've seen all businesses. Second, you're not just limited to one geography, you do it everywhere else. So if you look at, where did the seeds of facing challenges or solving for different problems, it again goes back to Airtel. So if I started off my career in Bihar and 1.5 years, you could say the same thing. Oh, Jagnoor, now in 2 years, you know the Bihar as a geography, you know sales as a geography, and your next role, the next day morning, you go back to Chandigarh. New team, new problem, new statements to solve for. But again, you succeed over there. Then you say, oh, I'm now a pro, and when it comes to leading large teams, your next role is marketing. So what that program like Airtel does is, and a lot of traditional organization, I think a lot of even credit goes to the FMCGs. They also shape leaders like that. Is what happens in those period of 5 or 6 years, you've done different geographies, you've done different roles. As a result, you're open to challenges up. So that is one. I think that's why, again, go back to that, those 8-9 years were the founding years. And I would have not achieved what I have achieved if not was for Airtel and that way they groom talent. Then comes to the second part of your question, why change? But I think that's even the question. The answer lies in your question earlier, right? At that stage, there are two options for you. One, you worked really hard for 9 years. To be honest, I think if I would have continued in Airtel, I would have had a far more comfortable life than what I've done in the last 7 years. Because you know everything, right? You know things back of your hand. You know how marketing runs, how sales run, what is the consumer persona, and every different thing. I would have told you in 2017 what my next 6 years of a career would be like. That's how you could predict that pieces in. But that's not what a personality is who would want to take up new challenges, who would want to say, I want to get off my comfort zone. But obvious question, right? Of your peers, why do you want to risk it all? Right? Everything is settled for you. Why do you want to go into a new industry? Why do you want to try it all? But that's what really excites you. And today, I can tell you one thing, and this is what I was telling to a friend a few days back. If for anything, right, some things worked, something didn't work, some things were better off. But do I ever regret taking that decision in 2017? No. Because the amount of exposure that I've got in the last 7 years is at least 10x more than would have happened if I would have continued in the same role or the industry. So today, if we sit across the table, I can talk to you about startups, I can talk to you in traditional companies, I can talk to 3 sectors. But if I would have continued, the only sector I could have talked to you about was how traditional companies run and how telecom is. So while I'm very, very grateful for what Airtel did to me, but I think even today, I can look back and say that every decision that I took, it just added to the story that I was building for myself.
Now it makes sense, because I think within Airtel, if you're shifting from one city to another city, one state to another city, it was already preparing you to work on uncertainties and work with new teams.
Agree.
So I think, though it's the same company, but again, India is it's a big.
We used to say Airtel, to be honest, every circle means every state is a company in itself. It's a different leadership, different challenges. Some state would have 10 competitors. Some state would have 6 competitors. Some state, Airtel is a market leader. Some state, Airtel could be a number 3 player. So it's actually running across 18 different companies, and that's why they've achieved the success that they have. And that gives you all the flavors that a corporate journey shouldn't give you.
So after Airtel, it was Oyo.
Yes.
So 9 years in such a big, already established institution, and then you shifted into hospitality, which was Oyo was a pretty new concept, right? I mean, like, not a new concept from a Booking.com perspective, but then I think in this side of the world, it was a new initiation anyway. And then I think, did you join during COVID times?
No, this is prior to COVID. This is prior to COVID. See, again, one of the things that I would want to clarify, I did not join Oyo because I wanted to do hospitality. I wanted to join Oyo because at that time when the startups were coming up, there was a lot of progress that we made. There were a lot of...
So did you apply, or you got?
No, I did not apply. So I met Abhinav. Abhinav is again one of the mentors. Abhinav was the COO for Airtel. Through a common friend, we got to catch up in Gurgaon. And when I met with him, and I generally say this, one of the things that got me over to Oyo, in 1.5 hours of interaction with Abhinav, I spoke for 5 minutes. Which means when you go a normal traditional organization or another, you're just proving your worth in. And here you found a leader who was 10x more humbler than anyone I've ever met, 10x more accomplished than a lot of leaders that I would have met in, but so humble. And in the next 1.5 hours, the person was able to sell me the story that Oyo was trying to solve, which is about how do you go across, and there's a big problem. What is Oyo solving for at that time? A big problem statement of predictable demand. If you travel to a new city, there could be 100 hotels in the city. How can we be assured for that if I see an Oyo board and I enter that property, I will get all my 7 promises in. I'll get a clean hotel, best of customer experience. And that I felt that, yes, that's a big problem to solve for. And not just for India, for global. And I think that is what, for me, excited. One is the leaders that you could work with. Second, the problem they were solving for was big. And the entire excitement of building it from scratch. I remember joining the team at Bombay initially. And I still say that I used to be the person who used to open up the office and close the office. Just imagine that after 9 years of experience where you're handling a 1,000-member team and you go in, but that's as good as building your own piece. And that excitement took me over there.
How do you define a good problem? What's the metrics? It has to be big enough to be good?
2 things. One I think is right. It is a big enough problem to be solved, but are you really solving a real issue? Right? Or is it just rational, a little small improvement from what was happening earlier? Or is it a big thing to solve in? And I generally say that when you grow in a traditional organization, and I used to say to my team that even if you switch off our phones, 90% of the world will continue running, right? Things will run. You just do incremental. You add back incremental in. But in a startup, right, the amount of contribution that the teams have will be 70-80. Because you're really building up from scratch. You're going ahead and acquiring the first consumers. You're going across and getting clear new partners on board. So I think the challenge is very, very different. But again, that's maybe a personality trait. Some people would not be comfortable with it because they would want the things to run in a particular way. But someone who really likes challenges, saying I want to solve a problem every day, one day you might be solving of what sort of a team should be hired in Oyo. The other day you're solving a problem, what should be the right partners for us. Third day you could be solving for what sort of an org structure should be there. That is a different level of a kick that you get.
I was having a call yesterday with my research team back home, and then I've sent your profile a couple of once we started talking, I've sent your profile, and then yesterday we were making this hypothetical case that maybe, because we'll come back to the Unacademy thing. There is the Academy centers. We saw that you initiated the idea of Academy centers where you took a EdTech company, which is technically it should be all digital, and you went it back to the traditional way. I'm like, you technically merged the physical thing. So we were thinking, okay, maybe Jagnoor is pretty well in terms of redefining revenue models. So maybe startups are hunting him down so that you can really help them diversify their revenue model. And even with the OU thing, I didn't knew before you that it used to operate cloud kitchen. All I used to think was, okay, it's basically a hotel, and standardize the hotel, and then it leverages on top of like this Airbnb model where the asset is someone else, and then they come in, build the brand, get the customer. But yeah, so we were just making a case that maybe startups are really hunting Jagnoor down to help them redefine the process.
Too big of a statement to make, to be honest.
But yeah, so you stayed in Oyo for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then you shifted to...
So I moved to Mondelez, which is FMCG. And the reason for that is I think one of the industries that really hone talent is FMCG. And whatever good that I talked about Airtel, the root for that comes in from FMCG, because a lot of leaders initially who moved into Airtel had all come in from the Unilevers, which is known as the place that hones leaders in. So while growing up in Airtel, one of the things that I always looked up to is FMCG and all the great leaders that we had coming over and transformed the way Airtel was. So at that time, that's an opportunity that came across of going into an FMCG industry. Took that call, moved to FMCG, spent another 2 years, is worked with Mondelez. Cadbury's is how we know of. And again, immense learning.
When I talk to you, it makes me remember there is a quote where they say, people don't leave companies, they leave leaders. People now, maybe I can also use it in reverse, that people don't join companies, they join leaders. Because you gave an example of how an hour-long conversation with Abhinav made you really feel the impact of the problem you guys were solving. So for a lot of young people, I think if you can help them understand how do you identify a good leader versus a great leader who can help you really grow, who can just provide you basic necessities for you to perform your day in and day out. So for you, if you have to, for example, if you have to advise 25-year-old Jagnoor, and if you have to tell him that, dude, this is how you identify good leaders with great leaders, and you should always follow great leaders, because that's where the true, how do I say it? That's where the true...
Agree. I think before I answer that question, I would want to answer a point that you made in your question is, I very strongly feel that you should never leave or decide of leaving because of a leader or not. That is one. Because that's what I've maintained over the years is that if someone comes up to me and saying he wants to move from one company to another because he didn't like a leader in a particular company, I say half of the time maybe the problem is with yourself, right? Maybe the leader is trying to give you feedback which you didn't take. Second is, even if you assume the leader is not great, there's no assurance that the new company, the leader will be better or the earlier one. So you should never decide about leaving a place because of a leader. But at the same time, whenever you're deciding to move, one of the things which would be very, very important is the leaders that you're going to work with. So while leaders might not be the reason why you leave one place, but leaders will always be one of the reasons why you join a new place. And that I can vouch for any transition that you've done. For example, one of the key reasons I joined OYO was my interaction with Abhinav Sinha. Because I really wanted to work with a leader like him and say that that is exactly what is creating an impact is all about. For me, at that age, achievements would have meant getting a great hike, getting a promotion before someone else. And there is someone on the other side who's a 35-year-old and built an empire like OYO. So for me, it just changes your perspective. But now I think the second part of your question, which is important, is how do you define a good leader? For me, the biggest...
Or how do you differentiate them with the great leaders?
Agree. I think great leaders, I think it's a common answer to the both. And you said, what would I tell a 25-year-old Jagnoor? Is just always look out for something that who are the leaders who are invested in your growth. And again, quote someone from, whatever I am today because of the leaders that I learned in. A leader very early in my career I worked with was Mr. Navdeep Jain. And he was part of my Airtel stint. And he used to tell me something that, Jagnoor, if you get a leader who's pushing you on a daily basis, means he's invested into you. Versus a leader who's being very good to you on a day-to-day basis, the way he's talked to you. And at the end of the year, tells you, you know what, Jagnoor, 7 months back you did a mistake. And that's the reason you're not getting a great increment today. Versus a leader who's telling you on a daily basis or saying, you know what, you could have done this better. Second trait, again with Navdeep, sir, is you should know if the leader invested into you to grow overall. And I'll give you very, very small examples. I think the very small personality traits, when I was transitioning from one role to another in Airtel and Navdeep sir became my leader, he used to even give me tips like saying how you should look at a particular problem, how you should go and meet a particular CEO, how you should present. So these traits generally tell you that is the person invested in your growth, or the only thing he worries about is the problem that you're solving for. And there's very seldom that you meet leaders who are invested in your growth. And I can tell that Jagnoor, 25-year-old guy, that irrespective of whichever stint, if you get a leader who you realize is invested in your growth, just grab hold of him and see whatever work that you can do, work with him, because that will really give you a long-term career.
But how do you notice people like this on a couple of meetings? I mean, like,
it will be very, very small indications, right? It could be very small indications of the person is doing a discussion and the advice that he's giving you is something more personal of your personality trait, which will help you grow as a career and not just deliver the task on the end of the day. And again, you would not get these learnings or these leaders every day in your job. They could be spikes. Maybe in a stint of 6 months, there could be one day where you realize, oh, Navdeep sir is really invested in me. Remember that and say, cherish that moment and grow into it. So sometimes what happens with us, and when I see the youth traveling in, you try to figure out these instances every day. That's not how careers are. Careers are long careers. And there could be periods in 6 months here, you might work with 20 leaders and you might find one leader who's really invested into you. Or there's a leader who just walks over to you and something where I said, who just puts a hand on your shoulder and say, oh, Anup, is all well today? Oh, you're not looking good today. Is there something I can help you with? Oh, how are things at home? Is everything settled? Oh, I realize there is something going on. Can I help? That one statement line is something, this person is invested in me. So for me, a great leader, and there are two yardsticks, right? What the leader has achieved on a professional side, see, that becomes basics. Because if somebody is not achieving good things on the professional side, those will anyways not be leaders across you. But for me, a difference between a good and a great leader is somebody who's really investing in his team. And I can tell you now, and now looking back 17 years journey, after a while in your career, the biggest thing that you can do is invest in your teams and rally your teams around a common mission. And people rally with you when they feel valued. They don't value because you did 10 reviews with them. If they feel that Jagnoor really cares for me, Jagnoor cares for my career, then they will rally behind whatever cause you want to rally them. So that becomes a very basic requirement.
You make me remember another quote. There is a conversation between secretary and a CEO where the secretary asks, "Sir, why are we retaining all these employees? What if they leave?" And the leaders reply, "What if they stay?" I mean, like, you don't really want...
No, and the other thing about it, right? And this is something I very strongly, fundamentally believed in my life. Today, any corporate professional, you spend more time with your colleagues than you spend with your family, right? You might like it, not like it. That's a different debate some other day, but that's a reality. So if you're not treating your colleagues as your friends or your family members, investing into their growth, having some good times with them, investing in their trainings, etc., then you're really not living your life fulfilled. If you're waiting versus, so that's why I generally say, more than the work-life balance, it's not about the number of hours that you spend in office versus at home. Work-life balance means, are you just balancing your things in? For example, if I'm spending a time with my colleagues and I'm with them for 9 hours and we're having a really good time solving a problem, I'm not even looking at a watch, what time do I go home? Versus if I say, oh, I'll have a grown face the entire day, but I'll wait for 7 o'clock because that's when I switch off, go home and spend with the time, then I would not be fulfilled. I will not be happy during that day. But if that's 7 hours, so today, some of my best friends, and I would say 90% of the friends that I have today are the ones who have met me during my corporate journey, who were ex-colleagues, ex-team members, ex-mentors. Those are the colleagues because whatever time that I spent with them in whatever stint or organization, we really enjoyed the problem that we were solving. And they, despite I moving from one industry to another, they continue to be great friends. And that's how life is coming.
And I think it's really important for young people to understand that if you're not enjoying a work, it just does not harm the company. It equally harms you, because what do you expect if you are going every day in a system where you are not really enjoying, and clockwise you're looking at your watch every other minute?
And that's your requirement, right?
Exactly.
As you rightly said, if I'm spending my 9 hours, I would not say 9 or greater because that might become a controversy, but even if you're spending 9 hours and you are not enjoying that, you're not smiling, and after a while, right, you should not be worried about being judged. For example, somebody told me, Jagnoor, you're so casual with your colleagues. What will they think about you? I said, they know what they need to think about me, because when I enter a meeting room and I'm reviewing, I'm a very, very different self. The moment I'm outside the meeting room, they're my friends and they know that difference. They know when Jagnoor is serious, where it's a friends with them. And that's a balance that we create. And we do that because it's more than them, it's for me as well.
Exactly. And I think a great trait in a good leader or great leader is how they can transition from a bad mood to a good mood. If you're scolding somebody on a meeting room and if you're in the same mood with him on a cafe, that's not a sign of a good leader, right? I mean, like,
I think you have hit the nail on the head, and because that's very core to me, which means, and I keep giving this advice to my mentees, people I work in. See, when you're not again, I would suggest, let's say, go back into a scenario. In a meeting room, there is something that targets have not been achieved, and let's say the emotions are running high or there's a tense environment. It's not that I'm in a bad mood. It's not that I had a fight with someone back in personal life and coming and getting out to you. You are into a scenario when, let's say, emotions are high, etc. You're solving a problem. Leave aside, you go to a cafe. The way I operate is, the moment that meeting ends and you're outside the room, you're a very different individual. And that is what you need to learn as a leader, to switch on and switch off, right? Which is, and this is a colleague. And again, let me give an example in Navdeep Jain that I used to give is, There was a day we were both on the floor. I used to be in the distribution team. He was my leader, and he was having a furious conversation with me. It was something I did not perform well on. And within a minute, I got a call from my wife, and that was the days where we were expecting. And the moment he just changes, Navdeep sir, he says, he said, "Beta, ghar ja, and if you need something, call me up." The person who was having a very, very serious conversation a second back, a second later is saying, "Oh, please go home and tell me if you need something." That is the sign of a leader. Because a second earlier, when he was having a furious conversation with me, it's not that he liked or disliked Jagnoor. It's not that his mood was bad or wrong. He was solving for a problem statement. But in principle, he really likes Jagnoor. They are good friends. And that is what I have maintained over the last 17 years. That I am never in a good mood or a bad mood. I am in a mood, I will not even call it a mood. I am role playing what the situation needs. If that situation in a boardroom needs me to be serious and asking tough questions, I will be the toughest person on there. But the moment we're outside the boardroom, the person should have a comfort of maybe coming in and walking in and say, "Jagnoor, you know what? Tomorrow I'll come late to office. I have some work at home." He doesn't need to think twice. Even if he had a very, very bad day in the review inside. Or he comes out and says, "Oh, Jagnoor, you remember I'm heading out for a 10-day leave." I say, "Bro, please go. And these are 2 tips I will give you what to do in Singapore." That's the way you should do. And Anup, again, if you're able to give that confidence to your team, that is when they open up. Right? If you work with a leader, and I've seen very less of them, who would say it's a bad mood for them. I don't see those leaders anymore. You would have said in the past saying, "Oh, I had a fight at a home, so today I'll, come and shout at everyone." That's not the leaders that we see. Most of the good leaders that we see are role playing. They're being a tough boss when they need to. They're being a brother when they need to. And that's what it should be.
Amazing. I think this has to be one of the so far a major takeaway from the conversation, that let's not even call it a mood. Let's play a role playing.
Yes.
If you do a justice in any role you are in, you are not doing justice to the person. You are doing justice to yourself, to the company, to the organization, and you are setting up a right trend for the people who will eventually come into your position. And people learn what they see.
And I'll tell you what, because it's important to understand this, because I see risk both sides. And what I mean by that is, there is obviously one risk of a leader who's always in a bad mood, right? You will never form a lead. You will never form a team. You'll never grow. On the other side, some people just want to follow a trend of saying, "Oh, I want to be known as a great guy." So even in a review, when the business is suffering, the person will be very, very casual. That also fails. Your first responsibility is towards the business or the problem that you're solving for. That is what your stakeholders are, getting you in there for. Your second responsibility is to bring a great culture to your team. So both those things are important. So do the role play which needs in a particular environment. Don't be at the edges. It should not. So if I see a boardroom where, your numbers are not met, you really, really not solved the problem, and the people are smiling in that room and saying, "Oh, it's okay, we'll handle." That's not what you're paid for. That's not you're in the room in. At the same time, another extreme, you have a bad review, you go out, the person comes to you, the personal requirement, say, no, I told you I'm not in a good mood. That's not what it should be. Role play for the situation and do justice to both the priorities. Do justice to your stakeholders for the problem that you're solving for. Do justice to your team by providing them a great culture where they feel valued and they feel safe. That's the way it should be.
It's easier said than done, right? I mean, I think for this, they need a whole different set of awareness within. The individual have to be aware in terms of his mood, in terms of his thoughts, in terms of his words. How do we learn that? How do we learn this skill set?
I think the most important thing to achieve is to not to be insecure as a leader. And I'll tell you why I say that. A lot of people who are not able to do that, and when I talk to them, they said, "No, Jagnoor, if I will talk to my team in a casual way, they will not take me seriously." Or, if after the board he's coming for me for a personal request and I talk to him nicely, he will forget of what happened in the review. All those things are coming from your insecurity of being judged. If you are comfortable in your shoes and you know that you are doing justice to your job, inside in the boardroom for the last 2 hours, you were reviewing and you reviewed every parameter. You took the right calls that were required for business. And outside, it's a casual, it's okay. The team knows. And that's why, right, sometimes it might take a month for the team to know you better, but you don't change your style for that. In a month, there might be a possibility some of them might feel, "Oh, Jagnoor is not a great leader, right? He was just on the floor smiling up. He was just putting hand on a shoulder and saying, 'Oh, what's up? Let's go out for a coffee.'" But when they've seen you for a longer time, it could be 6 months, they've seen both sides of it and they value both sides of it. And that's, I feel they, they tolerate you in the boardroom because they've seen you outside. They know, when do you form a great team? When the team actually realizes this person cares for me in the meeting, the person was asking me tougher questions because that was the right thing to do, solving my problem. It's not that he doesn't like me. The moment that combination happens, the moment that trust happens, that is when you make a deadly combo as a team. And that's what I've believed in. But one word answer to your question is, to be able to achieve that, the first of solve need lies within, which is be very, very secure of your leadership style. Don't be insecure of what people will think about you. If you've done something for years and it has worked for you, just continue doing that, going double dive on that.
Amazing. So post OYO, it was the FMCG.
Yes.
You stayed for a year long.
2 years. So that.
How was the experience in FMCG?
Again,
first FMCG, like it was telcos, hospitality and FMCG.
I think what FMCG taught me, the biggest thing was taught me is the physicality of a product. What do you mean by that is any product, any industry that I'd worked earlier, even in telecom, what do we sell? We sell air, and that is what we say. Even if you go wrong in your planning, you can redo a planning in a day because you don't need to solve for a physical product to come in. Whereas in FMCG, if there is a Diwali season coming in and you don't plan for it 3 months in advance, you cannot do anything on the D-Day. If 2 days before Diwali, you realize, there was a bigger requirement in your market for a particular set of chocolates, but you didn't plan it earlier 3 months, you cannot do anything because it will take a particular time, heads up to the plant to manufacture the chocolate, to send it back to your team. So one of the biggest learning that FMCG taught me was the physicality of the product needs a lot more planning in. You plan at an SKU level, you plan at time loans. And so that's why people would plan 3 months in advance. And that's why when you meet people from an FMCG, you'll see a lot of focus on planning. And where it comes from is that if you go wrong in planning, there's no level of, GTM efforts which can undo a planning with these. So that makes you a more balanced leader. And that was my biggest learning in FMCG.
And you also followed to FMCG because of any particular leader and anyone you wanted to work
Not
under?
from a leader, but I think obviously in my interaction where I met Desmond is a leader I worked with. Again, my interaction with him, one of the great leaders to work with, a lot of learnings. And whatever I am today is some product of the leaders that I've worked with. And in this stint, it was Desmond, Hemant Rupani, who was a sales director for the country, but great learnings from it.
You were the regional head before joining FMCG, right?
Yeah.
In OYO. So I could see Nepal as a what would you used to say? Is it Nepal? Would you consider it as a? I mean, like, let me reframe it. So while looking after the Nepal, was it a department or was it a new industry you were venturing, new market you were venturing? So how did it came?
It was one more market that we were handling because I see a lot of similarities in consumer persona, the way partners are of, let's say, I was handling East, North and Nepal. So a lot of similarities in the way East part of the country, India operates and Nepal operates. So it was for us one more critical market for us where you grow in. And I think one thing you would also agree, I think there's a lot of potential on tourism when it comes to Nepal. Been there, been to Kathmandu, been to Pokhara, some of the best properties that I've seen, some of the best experiences that I have. So for us, it came in from the potential of tourism it is. And why it long with time, it's more from a traveling perspective. My leaders from Calcutta, Lucknow can easily travel to Kathmandu. But for us, it was one more strategic market that was there.
Any particular challenges and opportunity you found on Nepal that is still you still remember?
Not something very similar. I think, as I said, very, very promising market for us and very, very similar learnings from the way east part of the country runs. And I think we just need to create much more awareness about the potential of tourism over there, because once you visit that, especially two cities that I really loved is Kathmandu and Pokhara, some of the best places to visit in.
But I think post-COVID, they moved out, right? I mean,
post-COVID, not just Nepal, there were a lot of markets where we actually consolidated for. This was about just seeing your limit where we went to grow in from, not just Nepal, internationally, some market we did that.
But by the time you're already into FMCG.
Yes.
So. And then Unacademy.
Unacademy.
How was the experience in Unacademy?
I think Unacademy is one of my most learning and fulfilling experiences, because one of the reasons I ventured into startups was the ability to solve a bigger problem, ability to pick up a problem and take it to an end-to-end case. And Unacademy gave me a chance to pick up a problem from scratch where we just had to be on a drawing board and eventually taking it to a business which is now flourishing across the country, 70 cities. So I take a lot of credit in.
So yeah, earlier I mentioned about Unacademy centers. So it was you who initiated the idea that, okay, we need a physical space where
I think it was a challenge which Gaurav was a founder at Unacademy who gave it to me, of saying there are these two particular categories of IIT, JEE and NEET, or more when it class 11th and 12th. What is the next growth lever for them? What can we do more to grow in this market? And the learning from Airtel that came in is whenever you have a problem to solve, just go back to the ground. Hear what the ground is telling you. I remember going to Kota. Kota is an education hub in India.
I watched the web series Kota Factory.
So I've spent a lot of time there. Go and talk to consumers, go and talk to customers and say, what do they really want? And what I heard on the ground was that especially students who are in the class moving from 10th to 11th, while they really acknowledge the support that online has been giving it to them, but they would even still value physicality a lot, which is for them, discipline is very important. For them, going and working along, studying along with their colleagues is very, very important. Those two aspects are far more important as compared to the segment which is higher studies, where people are either going to colleges or to their jobs and they prefer only online, because they would want to come back home or only spend weekends to study. But if somebody is moving from 10th to 11th, both for the parents and students, it's important the discipline and somebody mentoring them very, very closely, and the physicality of being with 60 students in a class and mentoring each other. That's the learning that we came in and came back from Kota, had a word with Gaurav, we both aligned, and that's where we started off. We started off from scratch of figuring out where should be our centers, what should be a curriculum, and every single aspect of the business.
So it was not really difficult for you to push the idea of going physical? Obviously, now we have this term called phygital, where digital companies are thinking about how do they integrate physical and digital side. But back then, I think it was not a tested concept, right?
I think two things here, right? One is very, very important is what are your insights based on? It should not be that you're sitting inside a boardroom and just from a fad or a perspective saying, oh, everyone else is doing it, we should do it. That's not how it should be. I think the senior most leaders should be able to go to the ground, talk to enough consumers and understand, is it a real need to solve for? Or is it just another thing to do? So for us, the first thing came in there where, we went on the ground, talked to consumers and really understood. One of the leaders, again, just to admire, is Vivek. Vivek was a COO that time. Both Vivek and me went to Kota, talked to consumers and understood that the consumers really want this, right? It's not that it's another thing to do or not. It's not that this will come with the growth in online. Online will continue growing. But there is this set of consumers who need a physical solution, who need an offline solution. So one, your why needs to be very, very stronger, and it needs to be backed by consumer insights. And this is not something which you'll hear through layers. It's not that somebody told someone, and then it came to you. You as a leader needs to go on the ground and validate all the assumptions that you have. Second important learning that, that was a culture at Unacademy was start small, which is saying on day one, we did not put up 50 centers. Day one, we only launched one center, which was Kota. We launched the Kota, saw the success in 2 months. That is when we made an investment in the next 5 centers, let them grow for 6 months, then made an investment for future. While we had all resources at our disposal, we had funds, we had money. But the way we would say is start small. If the PMF gets proven, which is it's proven that it really worked, then scale it up to a next level. Once you're able to solve for 5, scale it up to 20. I think that culture, and that comes from Gaurav, our founder, saying he would really want you to problem solve day, despite the fact that you'll have all the resources in. Whereas somebody else would have said on day one, okay, let's start 100 centers. That's not how we used to operate. First, proof there's a requirement. Start small with a very, very small team. The moment the PMF is proven, all resources are at your disposal, and then grow gradually. Both these things together, which is one, having a very strong why, and second, phasing out your growth is important to try these models out.
Obviously, talking to the customers, this has to be one of the biggest secret of solving any problem, right? But then when you look at a startup, a lot of innovation comes from when you figure out what customer needs, then thinking from an angle of what customer wants. So how do you really balance this dynamics of understanding what customer needs and giving them what is needed, not what they want, right?
I think that is where the concept of PMF comes in. And that's why I said, even if the consumers were Kota were telling me that they need an offline product, and basis that I would have gone and launched 100 centers in the next 6 months, might not have been the right thing to do. Yes, consumer wants it, but would they really pay for it? That is where PMF comes into play. For example, in our case, it was about starting one center, proving your hypothesis right, that yes, there is growth over there, consumers really value that product, and then go higher. But I would say for any other startup, and that's a request I keep making to a lot of entrepreneurs, which I work closely with, saying that if you feel there is a need of a product, try it out before building it up full end. And that is where, a lot of studies, yes, that's where come in from. A lot of people, they would not want to go to a consumer. They would want to build the end product, invest 6 months and years into it, a lot of money into it. And then you go to the market and realize nobody is ready to pay for it. That's a mistake a lot of founders do. What instead you should do is, yes, you have a consumer insight. You feel it is required. Make a very, very small sample of it. Go try it out, which is, we say, lean startup. The moment you realize this, go blitz scale it later. But first, establish that the consumer really needs it and is ready to pay for it. And you are able to serve something, deliver which others could not. And then blitz scale. The problem is when the blitz scale directly comes after the consumer insight, that is where a lot of us go wrong.
I was looking at the averages of India, and I think it is around 30, 31. The averages of Nepal is 24, 25. And I think among a lot of industry that you are in, this is one industry that has a direct impact or direct relationship with this young generation, right? So how do you see this education industry changing in the last couple of years? And because I assume with the kind of a vertical that you started, you are good with predicting trends. So is there any particular behavior change that you see in this education industry? And I'm asking this particularly because back home in Nepal, I, along with few of my colleagues, are thinking of an idea that maybe it's time Nepal thinks of alternative to university education. I mean, like a time where we push education that has a direct ROI, not just like 2 or 4 years a bachelor degree and then think of doing an internship and then figure out what you want to do through that internship. But then there's a concept, right? BYOB, build your own business, or project-based learning. So is there any particular trend that you have seen? And let me add one more context, because a lot of our viewers are wannabe entrepreneurs, right? So I think education is a great domain. And the amount of innovation that has happened in India, I think Nepal has yet to see that. But when I observe Nepal and India's market, a lot of things that has came to India in 2 to 3 to 4 years, you'd see similar trend picking up in Nepal. So obviously I've given you too much of context, but what I'm trying to say here, I'm technically asking the changes, the behavioral change, the pattern that you see, and the future pattern that might be coming in this industry.
I think 2 parts, right? One, the biggest problem that EdTech solved and is still solving for is accessibility, right? So the 2 parts of it, right? What you talked in the second part of your question was the content part, right? What should be taught or what sort of courses should come in. But even before that, one of the things which is EdTech's gift to India, and I think will come into Nepal and other countries, is accessibility, which means today a student sitting out of, let's say, a very remote town in Odisha, or let's say Bihar or a Punjab, has the access to the best educators based out of Kota. That was not possible in the past. Earlier, let's say if I was growing up in a city, let's say a Mansa in Punjab, and I wanted the best of the teachers who could be, let's say, based in Kota, the only option was picking up my stuff, traveling to Kota, and maybe my family could not afford the amount of cost that requires it. Today, I can just log into one of the platforms of Unacademy and get access to the best educators in Kota. So I think one thing that we undermine in this entire EdTech story is the power of accessibility that's given. A lot of debate happens around content, which should, and we'll come to that part of the story. But I think what we should realize that the biggest thing that you solved for is accessibility. It could be tomorrow. Let's say there's an educator sitting out of Kathmandu who's really good in entrepreneurship, and I'm sitting out of Bangalore. I want to learn from him, or leave aside anyone else. I want to learn from Anoop that how do you do digital marketing. And Anoop launches an online course sitting out of Kathmandu. I can just spend 2 hours every day online and study from you. Was that possible prior to EdTech? No. The only option would have been, I'll go and check in Bangalore, are there 4 or 5 physical educators who are talking about digital marketing? Second, I don't know how good or bad they are. Second, I'm doing a job. When do I go? So the biggest power of EdTech, which countries like India and Nepal they've already accomplish more, is the solving for accessibility part of it. What comes along with accessibility is the second part. The responsibility on a lot of us who are in EdTech is how do you solve for the content? And I think that is where a lot of work is happening. It's just saying nothing against the formal education or the university. They have their own merit, which happens. And I always feel my very strong principle, it's always an and not an or. I would not go and tell someone that whether you should do a university education or an online upskilling program. I will say balance the two. You might have a formal education from a university, but what stops you from enrolling into an AI course, which is an online course, just from an upskilling perspective? Bring the power of both together. Today, because if you say something that, I ask you, Anu, what's your awareness on AI? And you say, no, I have a very limited knowledge on it. That doesn't work. And I'll say all that it needs, it doesn't need a degree from Harvard or somewhere. You just go online. There could be 5 tutors who are really, really good. Enroll into a course and study whenever you are free. That power of learning when I want to, learning from wherever I am, is the real power of EdTech, which I see a lot of potential in Nepal. Nepal is also spread across country like we are in India, and with the hilly terrain, traveling from one city to another is not that feasible. But if you're able to take this power of EdTech across, you just upskill the entire talent available across.
I think Nepal enjoy one of the cheapest internet in the world, and I think not just Nepal. I think the South Asia. I think with the internet, everything that has happened in Jio in India, the internet penetration has really changed our life, right? So, I think now the accessibility, the infrastructure is not the core conversation anymore. And rightly said, it's the content now. But don't you think it does not really make sense to invest a lot of money and a lot of your time where, in fact, on the other side, you could just log into YouTube. You don't even really need to join. For example, if you want to learn AI, you can simply go to YouTube and take a couple of good free courses from University of Chicago, University of California. There are a lot of these universities that are publishing content for free. Then implement these learning to a real life scenario and then grow in that regard, rather than thinking that, okay, 4 years degree is going to give me so much thing and then I'll be equivalent, and then you have a thappa in your head that, okay, this is what I'm capable of. Don't you think now is the time? And even when it comes to AI, in the post-AI world, education will not happen by one person speaking in front of 40 people. In the world of personalization, I think it's a responsibility of that individual to identify what style of learning he learns best on and where it is available. So I'm just trying to, because back, I'm 90s kid. It was difficult. I will not say it like it was difficult like my father's or for my uncles. But then the kind of a content that is available right now for free, it's crazy.
But again, when I talk about EdTech, for me, YouTube and all these platforms and not an or. For example, today at Unacademy, more teaching happens on a YouTube platform than happens on our platform in. And they both talk to each other, because YouTube is a great way of a one-way communication, right? But when those students want a more highly engagement, they come into a different products of Unacademy, where it could be a smaller group, where it could be a both-way communication, which is solving for in. And I think it all goes hand in hand. Tomorrow, I could have an AI course, which is launched on YouTube. So YouTube is one of the platforms through which the learning impacts. I think what we were talking about is the importance of, and accessibility was not just about the internet being available. Accessibility is about these access. There's a great teacher sitting out of Bangalore. He's accessible to students sitting out of Kathmandu. That is what accessibility means, content means. Second, what are some of these edtechs are able to solve for is there's enough content available on YouTube, right? Tomorrow you go and search for AI tool or AI course. There could be 200 videos available on YouTube. Whereas one of the operator in the EdTech world could have launched the AI course, which is more detailed. There is a 30-member team investing into content every day. There are proven use cases in the past. You just might just feel from a credibility, that course is better than that. But again, would I want you to limit only to that content creator? No, I would say learn from him. At the same time, go on YouTube and use this entire free access available of content and use both those things together. Why should you limit to one platform?
100%. So you think the value brought by these external platforms against YouTube is the interactivity between the tutors and the students? It's the personalization.
It's a personalization. It is interactivity. It could be other tools. For example, somebody's preparing for an exam. He needs testing modules as well. He needs some feedback mechanism on them. That's what these platforms will come in for. And again, both these things need to go hand in hand together. You can't be one of the two. You'll not say that I will launch an EdTech and I'll not be on YouTube. Or you said only on be YouTube, not be. That doesn't work. In today's world, and again, I go back to a leadership principle that I again learned in Airtel, is the power of the word and not or. A lot of time you'll say, should I do this or should I do that? But the real growth comes in when you start solving for and. How do you ensure that I reach my audience through YouTube as well as my platform and in any business that you do?
And if I ask you the same question from a perspective of certification, because right now we're talking about relevancy, right? What is relevant and what is not relevant. What do you have to say for certification?
So for me, I think there are two parts of it, right? One, there could be some set of jobs, etc., where a formal certificate is mandatory. It could be a government job, etc. You say you need a particular degree or a certificate to do that. But once you've crossed that threshold, right? Let's say you are a graduate who's completed the basic set of requirements in, There, for me, the power of content is more important than the certificate behind it. Because once you're growing in a corporate career, a lot of people come in saying, let's say somebody's 6 years into corporate, working in or want to be an entrepreneur. And he says, should I go for a particular university certification course or a content creator whose feedback is very, very positive? I will go after the content and not the certification, because that is what adds more value. But yes, basic certificates might be required it's a more of a basic hygiene required in. But if you have the basic hygiene in place, for example, if today I have an engineering degree and an MBA, I would not care for the name behind the certificate. I will worry more about the content that gets delivered. I would actually go for a young content creator, 25 years guy teaching me AI versus going from a Ivy League college teaching me AI. Because I think this person has done more hands-on and more learning versus the other two. That's the way. It depends on the use case that you're solving for.
You hire a lot of people. So how many times have you went through the certificate that people bring along with their CVs?
I think it's more important about, there could be whatever in the CV. I think what's more important is the way you are able to back it up in your conversations with us. If somebody says, first of all, I think it's very, very important to be aware about new things. I'll give you an example. I go to a lot of colleges for talks. I went to one of the colleges and I met, these are first year students. I met 2 students. First one came to me and said, you know what, Jagnoor, I want to build a career in digital marketing. I said, perfect. What have you done about it? And the person says, sir, nothing. I'm the first year right now. Second year, there is an elective course on digital marketing. I'm planning to pick it up. And then I want to build a career in digital marketing. I said, great, perfect, good job done. 5 minutes later, another guy comes to me. He says, Jagnoor, I want to build a career in digital marketing. I said, similar story. But I said, what have you done about it? He says, sir, I've done 5 certifications from Google. I'm heading the PR committee and digital committee of my college. I have my own website page that I'm built on. I've done 2 internships which were free for digital marketing. Just imagine which one of the 2 has more success.
100%.
But that's the world that you're competing with. You're no longer, if you'll say, oh, I'm just interested about digital marketing and not done anything about it. Trust me, there are people out there who already done 4 certifications. And so I think that's more important. It's not about what was there in the CV. It's about the amount of efforts that the person has already taken. But this, I feel, is a trend that needs to change. And I give this example again and again. When I was preparing for my MBA, this is way back in 2007. So after a written exam, you have an interview process. Suppose a written exam, once you clear and you get your interview calls, I went to, in Chandigarh, I went to one of the coaching institutes and I said, in an interview, there's generally a question asked that, which specialization do you want to do in marketing, in MBA? And I said, sir, my friends are telling me that the right answer is that I've still not decided. I want to start MBA. And after end of first year, I will decide whether it's marketing or finance. The person told me in 2007, he said, Jagnoor, this answer would have been valid 5 years back when the internet boom had not started. Today, because of internet, all resources are available. What stops you from doing research today? Why you want to do marketing or finance? I took that advice. I went ahead, read few books. One of the books I still remember is 22 Laws of Branding, Immutable Laws of Positioning. And just guess, that was one of the main questions that were asked me in my speech and interview, which is saying, what do you want to do? And my answer was, why am I particular about marketing? Why I want to do marketing? But the irony is, fast forward today, 18 years. And when I go to colleges, I still hear same answers. And I generally quote them that if this answer was not valid in 2007, what makes you feel this answer is valid in 2025? Which means if you want to build a career in digital marketing or entrepreneurship and you have not taken any initiative around it, and you're just waiting for your college or somebody else to give you those learnings, trust me, you're not living in the real world today.
And that's what I was saying. The second guy, I think you would have hired him any day
I would any day. I would not just then. I would even still today try and go back to him saying, if you're a role, come in. Because the person who's with such high intent, anyone would want to hire.
So now this second guy does not even have to invest a time on the elective course that the college will provide. He already knows way more than, most probably he knows better than his teachers because hands-on experience, right? And like a lot of these digital skill set, technology is changing so fast that I am not sure any books can justify the pattern, the trend that is coming. You just have to see, watch, do, get your hand dirty, and then come to a conclusion. Okay, for this year, this is the standard, but I don't know what's going to happen next year, right?
Agree. And again, Anup, digital marketing is one example. Tomorrow, let's say you go to Kathmandu and you meet a young talent who says, Anup, I'm not clear whether I should do a job in a bank or should I start my startup on my own. Your answer should be, what stops you from researching more about it? What stops you from reaching out people on LinkedIn, on banks, or saying what sort of a life they have, what sort of a career they have, what are the growth opportunities they have, versus reaching out to a startup entrepreneur and saying, can I come and spend a week with you? Can I shadow you? That's more important. Every resource is available today. But if you'll say, no, I am not clear, somebody should come and tell me, it doesn't work in that way.
Exactly. And I think it's reaching out is one of the best things that I have learned in my career, because this podcasting and even meeting you, someone from Punjab, someone from Bhairava, and I reached out to Sampark and we got connected. It would not have been possible if it was not a text to Sampark that, hi, dude, do you think you can get me connected with him? So I think, so one is reaching out. The other thing that I see among the youth is the incapability to self-reflect. Ask the internal question, because I might ask a lot of questions to Jagnoor and then how did you do this and that. But if I don't reflect it, do the internal self-reflection, I think they would this external motivation, external information will not last long. So I really see this skill set missing out on youth. And so my question to you is, how can a youth who is watching this can build that habit of self-reflection and then be more aware? Research, reflect, self-aware, research, reflect, self-aware, and then take action.
And I'll again go back into the root cause. I generally feel answering the root cause of a problem before giving a solution. The issue you are not able to internalize is because you externalize the issues. And I think that's a bigger problem. Whenever there's something is not working out for me or any individual or a youth, the problem is the normal tendency is to externalize the issue. You saying, no, it's nothing is wrong with me. I'm a perfect guy. Maybe the company could not see my talent. The company could not give me an offer. My professor is not good. Or there's no enough opportunities in the city that I live in. You're always externalizing the issues.
There's always an excuse.
Always an excuse, always external. It's not my fault, it's the other's fault. The moment you stop doing that and you realize that you internalize and saying, what can I do better? Right? The same opportunities, same city. There are people who have been super successful. There are people who will just keep cribbing about it. The moment you internalize, you'll start solving for it. But the starting point, as you said, what will it take for people to internalize and problem solve, take initiatives, is the moment they stop externalizing the issues. And that's something I very, very strongly felt. And, I've told people they could just ask yourself. And there is this principle that we say, very small one, which is a 90:10 principle. This is something I would have learned during my engineering in one of the talks that I was hearing in, and that have stayed with me throughout my life. It says that 10% of your life depends upon what happened to you or what your external environment was, etc. 90% depends upon how you reacted to that situation or what you did about that situation. If you realize this is a powerful statement. For example, COVID came, right? Let's say everything stopped. You were a student, you were a youth, you were going to college. The college is shut down. That is 10% of the problem. Now there could be two students. One student says, oh, college is not happening. I can't do anything. What can I do? I can spend more time on Netflix. I can sleep. There's nothing much to do. That's not my fault. There's a lockdown. I'll wait for lockdown to open up. There's another student who says, okay, colleges are now online. That gives me a lot of time. I'm saving 4 hours on travel. Can I go and start investing into my learning? Can I go on a YouTube and maybe pick up a topic and research about it? Same problem. Just because the reaction was different, the two people could have done very, very differently out of it. So that's why I always felt, right, it's only 10% which is the external point. But the way, what you do about that scenario is the 90% part of it.
Mm-hmm. I remember there is one of my mentors used to say, every opportunity comes during chaos. It's the chaos that comes with an opportunity. And if I have to reflect back my career, there was an earthquake in 2015. And then I got a lot of new opportunities because I started connecting with a lot of development agencies. We did content for them. And then it came out an opportunity. Then COVID happened. It was a chaos. But then I figured we started running online courses. So I think if you rightly said, if you start internalizing and start taking blames within, okay, maybe this is my mistake. Maybe I'm not thinking in the right direction. Maybe I am not interpreting it from an opportunity perspective. And once you start internalizing that it's your mistake, what do you do the next? You start correcting it. You start a different approach.
Yes.
But then when you say it's a Jagnoor mistake that this happened, it's like, now what can you do? You just sit back and then wait for Jagnoor to improve, and then only your life would be sorted.
And the other thing is, right, if today, right, if there is something which is wrong with me and I need to act upon it, and I just keep on externalizing it, it does not create any impact on the people outside, right? For them, it does not matter what Jagnoor achieves in his life or what happens in his life. The only person who's going to impact is Jagnoor. So if I don't take control of the situation, if I don't internalize, if I don't problem solve for myself, things won't move. So I think a very, very important lesson. Good one.
So I think by now even our audience must have realized a pattern. Established company, startup. Established company, startup. I mean, like Airtel, then Oyo. FMCG, then Unacademy. And now into Practo. So that's what I was trying to bring it up. Like, is it something like, okay, I'll go into an established company, I'll learn things, I'll go back to startup and implement. And then I'll go back to a big established company, I'll learn things and I'll go back to startup and implement. It seems like a pattern, I don't know if it's intentional or...
I think that's not intentional. And I think what's more important when you're working across industries and organization is what muscle are you building and what problem you're solving. And what I mean by that, and I'm reflecting on a conversation I was having with a colleague just 2 days back. And there's a young talent, 2 years experience, comes to me and says that I've done a particular role for 3 months, Jagnoor, should I change a role? I said, why do you want to change the role? The person said, I want to change the role because I realize the other problem is something which is more prevalent today and everyone in the organization is talking about it. I said, that's not how careers are built. In a career, it's not that every day you're seeing a spike in learnings, etc. Career learnings are long term. And in a month, you could only have 2 days where you really picked up a new skill set. But on the other state, you're solving for BAU. What is more important in a career to say is that at this stage of my career, which muscle am I building? The muscle there could be a year when you're building on your muscle on marketing. There could be a year where you're building a muscle on GTM, on-ground execution. There could be a muscle where you're building muscle on strategy. So you might want to do a role which is a sales role, and a year later you want to do a marketing role, and a year later you want to work with the CEO and see how the larger pictures get solved for. So every year or every 1.5 years, it's important that which muscle of yours that you're building in. And if you want a long career, you want to grow into a leadership position, are you building different muscles or not? What a lot of people end up doing is they only end up building into one muscle, which could be somebody wants to be a sales guy. They don't want to come out of a comfort zone. They say, no, I'm a sales guy. I don't want to do, let's say, a marketing role. I don't want to do a different industry. But then they have nobody else to blame if after 10 years, somebody tells you there's no other roles that I have. If somebody wants to be a CEO in the future or do his own startup in the future, you'll only be able to do that if you're able to do all that. And the reason is not that 10 years down the line, you would want to run the marketing function. But even if you want to be a leader or run your own startup, as you said, entrepreneurs, and you've built a muscle on marketing, you'll be able to ask your team the right question. You'll be able to guide your team on the right path. So it's very important for me and people that I guide. Are you building different muscles or not? Anytime you feel that you're getting into your comfort zone, please challenge yourself again. And that will really help you grow your career. It will really help you solve bigger problems when you're able to build different muscles and solve problems, which is very, very wide range.
And also, the world has become so much of interdiscipline, right? I mean, like, it's an interdisciplinary world where now a department head might need to understand the side of HR because he need to hire his people in department. He needs to groom a department. Head of HR might need to understand finance and P&L because he might have to build a HR strategy, and then he might have to understand the pay scale. So seems like the world has turned into so interdisciplinary, I mean, like, you can't just operate in any domain. And most importantly, if you are in leadership in any of the department, you have to have that everything that it takes to run a company. And I was going through your profile, and somewhere I saw you were also thinking from an angle of P&L. And on your position, you have to think from an angle of P&L. Now, you can't think like, okay, P&L is not my issue. It's the stress of a founder, right? I mean, like, it has become so interdisciplinary.
No. I think, again, 2 parts of your question. First, I think I don't any longer see leaders in any particular domain who do not have a hold on other businesses or other verticals. I think 15 years back, we could have had a finance head who will say, I don't know anything about sales. I don't know anything about HR. I just understand finance. Or there's an HR leader who will say, I only understand the HR aspect. Today, when I see leaders around me, different startups, etc., you feel people, see, there is one core strength, your core domain, which could be an HR, which could be finance, which could be sales, which could be marketing. But your 30% expertise is you know how other things run. And that is when you grow up a leader, you become an HR head, you become a finance head. It's very important for you to understand the other aspects of the business as well. And any successful leader that I've seen right now balances the two out together. The second part of your question is even more critical. I don't feel, and especially when you work in startups, I don't feel the P&L is responsibility of the CEO or the founder. P&L is a responsibility of every leader who's managing a team, who's taking a decision on a day-to-day basis on any cost investment or any growth investment. The moment you start doing that, that is when the organization starts growing. If you would think, and that might happen in a traditional organization, that somebody in the central office who's deciding on the cost and the growth levers, and people below are only implementing it. But when you come to a startup, right, every leader need to be responsible for the P&L that they handle. Leave aside me, even if I have a regional head who's heading north or east, I would expect him, and they obviously deliver on that they understand what are the growth levers, they understand what are the cost implications, and every decision that they make is balancing the two out. And they understand the P&L impact of every decision that they make. Once you start doing that, and there are 100 people in the organization who value the P&L importance, that is exactly when you start growing up.
Exactly. The world has changed so much, no? I mean, like,
It's
crazy.
changed on its head in the last 15 years, to be honest.
And in last 2 years, this AI thing has completely rewritten the rules. What do you think about youth who are, or professionals who are quite afraid of AI? What if this might take my job? What if I might have to shift into a more menial jobs, or my revenue might drop down?
I think there's something I read on LinkedIn which is very true, right? Which said that it's not AI will take your job. It's people who are equipped with AI who will take your job. And not a scary statement, but I think I very strongly feel, and I'll give you a parallel which I keep talking to my colleagues. When we started off a career 15 years back, and we got into the corporate world, and we met leaders who were like 10, 15 years already in the corporate world, thing that we brought on the table is our understanding on very small thing, which is Google, Excel, pivot table, VLOOKUPs. They're very new terms to them. And our moat was, we can, for example, for you, it might sound very common sense, but that way, if a person could do a pivot table in Excel, that was a big skill to have. Similarly, in today's time, if you're not equipping yourself with AI, trust me, leave aside whether you lose your job or not in the future, your productivity is half. And I feel, going back to the LinkedIn statement of, people using AI, I very strongly feel that every passing day, you should figure out that how can you be more productive using AI. Leave aside whether AI will take my job 10 years down the line or not, or 5 years down the line. You don't know what happens in the next 5 to 10 years. But why would I not want to use AI for everything that I do, and I make myself far more productive? If I'm able to do that, that really helps. Leave aside anything else. I was in a Europe trip last month, and I remember I was taking a train journey from one station to another. I actually put it on AI, very simple thing. Which side of the train should I sit in? Right, which have a better views. And they actually gives you a brief. Right side, you have a better view of the Matterhorn mountains. Perfect. So my point is, please start treating AI as a friend and a companion, which makes your life much more effective, much more gruel, instead of worrying that it's a tool to come in. The only message that I want to give to the youth and everyone, you do not have an option of not imbibing AI. That's for sure. It will take your job, not take your job. I don't have an answer. But you do not have an option of not imbibing it. Because tomorrow, it is not because the role was being done by AI. But if there's a colleague who uses AI tools, is 2x more productive than you are, he might get a faster growth than you do. Then it is again, it's not AI to be blamed. It is for you to be blamed that you were not ready to learn. And that takes me to a very fundamental point that I say, right, is having a growth mindset. Today, I can tell you, even after 16 years of my career, I would be enrolled into more upskilling courses and that's a challenge I can throw in. I have around 20 upskilling courses that I've enrolled in, ranging from how to make a YouTube video to how to grow on LinkedIn to how to do AI, Coursera, etc. Because I feel there's so much more to learn and improve. And that is what I see as a growth mindset. Versus if I get somebody with 2 years experience saying, I know it all. I don't need to invest in learning. That's not how it could be.
So so how to save yourself from getting overwhelmed, because there's so many things to learn. I think a lot of people don't start because they are overwhelmed with the amount of option available, right?
My point is start, right? See, what a mistake that a lot of does do, we overthink. We will spend 10 days thinking which AI course to take, versus if I would have at least started 10 days back, at least one of them would have been done. Again, the fundamental principle of growth mindset is, are you better today versus what you were yesterday? Even if it 0.001, it matters. Point would be, you will say, oh, this is where I am. My destination is, let's say I want to be a pro in AI. And you say, oh, it's a very far away. But if in one day I could just learn how to write a better prompt on ChatGPT, I'm better than what I was yesterday. If I'm able to understand how do you mid-journey and create an image, I'm better than what I was yesterday. So start taking those small steps is important. We generally think about a leap and then get afraid that whether I take a leap or not. Nothing stops you from taking that small step and start moving towards your destination.
I'd like to add a quote here. I'm a quote guy.
Oh, I love
We overestimate a lot of things we can do in 1 year, and we underestimate a lot of things we can do in 10 years.
bang on.
Right?
I think fully agree.
And we are always so yeah, as our name suggests, doers. Just do.
Like,
Just act.
I think that's the key. Act on it. Don't overcomplicate thinking. If there's something to be done, just take a call, right? If it is wrong, reverse it. But a lot of people will spend 1 month of thinking between the two options, whereas the time taken to do one of the options was 10 days. But you spend 30 days to decide which of the two is better. That's not progress.
So, what brought you to HealthTech? Now you are leading Practo as the Chief Operating Officer. So, what made you shift from EdTech to HealthTech?
I think the first core was again was when I met the founder. I think superb. He's one of the most humble persons that I've met. Somebody who really is solving a bigger problem, and what keeps him excited every day is he really wants to simplify healthcare. He wants to take quality healthcare to every person. And that's what the mission that I came on board. And for me, again, building new muscles. One muscle is how do I help a business which has grown over the years, taken international. Second is a muscle, how do you balance 3-4 more businesses. Third, we are a profitable organization. How do you continue grow at the same time be profitable? I think those muscles is what excited me about the opportunity. And the final decision metric was when I met the founder, one of the leaders you'd really want to work with.
So I think I recognize a pattern over here. Most of your decision about your career seems to boil down into who are you working with, the people, the leaders, the colleagues.
I think that's again very, very important. But see, again, the first part would be, is the problem that you're getting to solve, is it big enough or not? But if tomorrow I have two equivalent problems, I will pick up the better person out of the two. But will that be the decision metric one? No. The first would be, is there a big enough problem to solve? And if there are two people solving the same problem, I will work with a leader who would I really want to work with.
But don't you think it's much better to work on a smaller problem with a great leader, because a startup can always evolve and the problem, they could always hunt for new problem, than to work for a nasty leader with a bigger problem? So don't you think the first metric should be the person you are working for or working with?
I think what you define, I would just want to correct it here. When I say a big problem, I'm not saying the scale at which the organization is today. It could be 0 rupees revenue. Problem means what you finally want to solve for. That could be 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, is a problem statement that you're solving for. It's not what the scale of the organization is today. That's not. And I actually believe in the smaller the organization right now, the bigger impact that you can create. So I think that's very clearly.
Has it ever happened to you that you shifted from one job to another job and you have to compromise on the lower pay scale because the company is not ready to pay the same amount of money you used to pay it earlier?
I have actually done it in the past, right? Without quoting which of those. And to be honest, it really doesn't matter. Because again, as I said, right, and I think this even proves my statement earlier that none of these movements in the past have been anything related to monetary, etc. It's about the problem that you solve and the muscle that you build. I've actually taken that call in the past and zero regrets about it. Because eventually, when you get into a job, whether you're getting that 5%, 10% extra at the end of the day, that's not what keeps you excited. That's exciting for the first 10 days or the first month or so. What keeps you going? Do you really love going to your job every day? Do you really love solving the problem? And that day you'll not worry what your paycheck at the end of the month was. So that would be on my decision metric, would be maybe the third or the fourth. First is problem. Second, the leaders that I work with. Right. Third would be what sort of a culture, etc. we have. Fourth or the fifth would be the monetary piece. That was the last thing for me to decide on that.
The other pattern that I've seen among few of the youth back home is when they move from one institution to other institution, they don't really invest time and time to make sure the transition is smooth, make sure the existing leader of the past company is happy, has the basic has the basic handover has been done, and they're always excited about the newer opportunity, and they end up losing that opportunity to build that good relationship for the one last time, because a lot of time people remember the emotion you left them with. It's not the emotion that you came with, right? So how do you suggest, because you have done so many wonderful transition in these all big industries, and so what's your suggestion is like?
Quote unquote is, I think that's the biggest mistake a professional can make. For me, that last 1 month is 10x more important than what you would have done in the last 3 years in that organization. Nothing matters more than the relationships that you've built, even if it means dropping the opportunity that you had on the other side. If it comes at spoiling the relation where you are, I would always value, and it's not because you'll again say going back to relations in, but as a professional, ensuring your exit is the most professional way it is. Ensuring that the relations are not harmed are more important than anything else, because that's a responsibility that you owe back to the organization. And I keep quoting, when I left Toyo, I was the last person to leave office that day, because there's like 2019, etc. And that's what I get remembered for, right? And most of the founders, most of the colleagues that I've worked with, they continue with the friends and colleagues today. For example, even today, if I need to bounce off an idea, I will not even think before calling up Gaurav, who was founder at Unacademy. He's a mentor to me, he's a friend to me. But that's the equation that we maintained, because that exit was, I ensured that I fulfilled the duties that I had to. But if for whatever reason somebody burns the bridges, it is not worth it, because you really don't know what is waiting for you at the other end. But you actually know the people that you spent a year, 3, 5 years into it. Nothing is worth spoiling that relation or burning that bridge, is my piece of advice to everyone who's looking at it.
And I think something the young guys should really ponder upon, because I think when you're young, you feel like
It's an example, right? On a very different perspective. Example that you hear, many young folks, when they're growing up, they end up using a lot of credit cards, don't pay, throw it away. They don't realize. And 10 years down the line, they realize, oh, the CIBIL scores or the credit scores are bad, then nobody's ready to give them a loan. It's very similar to this. You're not realizing the impact that spoiling these relations and burning these bridges are having in a long term of your career. And as a mentor or somebody bit more aged than some of the audience over here is, nothing is worth it, to be honest. Please ensure, respect that relation. Ensure you fulfill all your duties. Decide that how, and have a very open conversation with the founder, your manager, on what all needs to be delivered before you move in, and do your part well. See, at the end of the day, irrespective of this phase or any other place, it's very important. Are you doing justice to your job? Are you loyal to what your responsibilities are? Everything else solves for it.
I whenever I'm talking with my teams who want to take an exit to a new company, I give them an example of traveling on a boat. You know, when you travel on a boat, all you know is where you are heading towards, but you don't really see like there is no footprint. And is that how you want your career to be? You really want to erase all your footprint that you have done? Because at the end of the day, it's the relationship that is the biggest asset, right?
And I think after a while, I even say it's the legacy that you leave behind. And the legacy is the relation that you've built, the business impact that you've created, and the way people remember you. At the end of the day, we are humans, right? You might be a great friend for 3 years. In the last 1 month, you do something which was not right for the, I will remember you for that. And that impacts the legacy that you leave behind. And the other payroll, leave everything else. After a while, you cannot grow a career without references. You cannot, people will check for it. And any such, for example, today if I hire a talent and I hear a negative word like this from one of my references, I will not hire it. Because if he can't be loyal to the company that he's working in, how do you expect the person to be loyal to me when he comes to me? So that's very, very, it's a P0 requirement.
You have already answered the question of this question that I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask you anyway to see if we can come up with more perspective. So in last 1 hour, what I've listened to you is you have made things very simple for you. You know, I mean, like when you make principles in your life, it becomes much easier to make decisions, because life is not always black and white, right? You have to make decisions. You have to, sometimes you follow your integrity, you follow your hunch, you follow opportunities, you follow the trend. But listening to you, it seems like the basic principle of doing a transition in a career is, one, if the problem is big enough; two, if the people are good, worth working together. So makes the decision to switch to a bigger opportunity is much easier, right? Because now all you have to do is look into these two principles, and if this is stick on the both end, go ahead. But now that's the pattern that I see, and amazing. I think everybody should come up with their own principles that suits them well. But where I'm coming from is, I think a lot of young people I have this fear that if I keep on switching industry, maybe my CV will look like as if I cannot commit for a longer run. Maybe I have a commitment issue. Maybe I will just be a jack of all, master of none. So, how do we tell these people that eventually, if you are working hard, if you have the good mindset, you'll climb a leadership ladder? And you have already quoted a couple of minutes ago that at the end of the day, business is basic. On a leadership position, it's the few basic things that you do right to to actually lead a good team. So, how do we make these young people understand?
No, I think again, let me coach correct over here from one perspective. When I say you should pick up new challenges, you should pick up new industries, I'm not advocating that you should switch jobs 1 year, 2 year every day. For example, one of the two switches that I might have made in the last 6 years should not have been made. Right? Not from any other perspective. I might have had my why I did that at that moment. But ideally, you need at least 3 to 4 years in a particular organization to really leave an impact. And I saw the advantage of that when I was in Unacademy. Before that, because whatever reasons, I made one or two switches and I'm meeting one of my mentors, and the mentor told me, Jagnoor, you need to spend 3 years to see cycles. And that is what I saw when I was working in Unacademy. Is the first year is a 0 to 1. You're building something from the scratch. Year 2 is where you say, or you take it to scale, you blitz scale, you take it to third. Year 3, you take it towards profitability. So I have a very, very strong proponent. Till that time, you don't have a very, very strong reason of why. It could be something that didn't work out for you, or there's some other opportunity you really want to take a stake on. It should not be a fashion that, you want to move every 1 year, 2 years. That's not what I'm advocating in. What I wanted to advocate was that if there is a right opportunity available, which you feel is the right opportunity, if you spend enough time in a particular role, what should not hold you back is the fear of unknown. That is what I advocate, right? You spend 2 years, 3 years, 4 years into an organization, great opportunity, a startup you really want to explore. You should not hold yourself as saying, oh, new industry, new role, will I be able to perform in? Have your confidence in yourself that if you have a basics right, you'll excel. But it is not that just for the sake of moving. The last thing I would ever tell anyone is saying, oh, I've spent 1 year, 2 years, should I move a company? That doesn't help. It should always come with a very strong why. Why are you particularly making a particular switch?
Makes sense. You have worked with a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs. Back home in Nepal, I think there is a wave of entrepreneurship. Everybody wants to become an entrepreneur. But then there is also a problem that I noticed that everybody wants to write CEO and founder on their LinkedIn profile, on their Instagram bio. I mean, like it's the love for the title that is motivating them to start a company. So, and along that, maybe there is also a negative connotation when it comes to a job that why should you work for someone else? Why should you work for someone else's dream? You should be building your own dream. You don't really become richer. You grow by working someone else. But I feel these are very limited lens that you are looking at these two verticals, right? And someone like you who have worked with so many amazing leaders. I think every company's like most of these companies have a noticeable leaders. What should be a right lens to look at job versus, or not, let's not even say versus, what should be a right lens to look at job and I'm using and a job?
I think first of all, both the examples that you gave, I do not agree. For example, I have never met a founder who wanted to be a founder because he wanted to write CEO and founder on his tag. They would want, actually those founders actually give up a CEO tag to someone else if they feel somebody else can solve the problem better. And you talk to any great leader, they'll say tomorrow if they find that CEO is better than them, they do that because they are more interested in solving the problem. They are not interested with the tag that comes along with it. Second, I don't even feel if anyone takes a call, and if there's still someone who's took up a startup because he wanted a CEO and a founder tag, there are enough startups which fail, to be honest. Second, I don't think the reason of starting up should only be because I don't want to work for someone. That also doesn't work. And that's exactly, again, the reason why 90% of the startups won't work. You should only do a startup if you're really, really committed and feel in the problem that you want to solve for. And that's why if you see any great founder, and you go and talk to them, you will realize their why is very strong. They really believed that problem had to be solved for. The problem could be solved for. And they went in all in. I can tell you most of these founders, they work 10x more than any of the employees that you would have met in. They really grill it out. It's not easy. I met someone a week back, a person who's done 2 startups in the last 7 years, would have not even earned anything out of it. It takes a lot of commitment. It's not that easy. So my only submission is you should only do a startup if you've identified a problem which is worth solving for, and you can really commit a long time in solving for that problem. If you're done, if you're aligned with that, you will do a great run. You will solve for it. But the inclination is no. I don't want to work for someone. I'll do startup. I want a CEO tag. I'll do a startup. Trust me, enough startup will start and fail. Startup will not fail if your why is clear. You really, really want to commit for it. It's not easy to be a founder. I can tell you this.
Good one. So we're almost towards the end of our podcast, and talking to you, everything that we have achieved, it didn't came through a pure luck, easy working nature, right? You obviously 100% have gone through a lot of this hard work. So reflecting back to your journey, Jagnoor, from a small town in Punjab to this leadership position in Bangalore, leading Practo, which operating in 22 countries, a global company. If we have to reflect back, what are the few, let's give it a number to make it easy. Can we identify at least 3 important decisions Jagnoor did that can be generalized, that you are here because of these few good decisions?
I think the first was the ability to take up challenges, which was very, very important. There were a lot of times in my life where I've actually gone out of my comfort zone and picked up between the two options. I always chose challenge versus the comfort zone. And it's not just about after I left Airtel. Within Airtel, when there were choice between 2 roles, I always picked up role which will solve for my long run and not solve for my comfort today. Second is the ability to hone relations, right? That's very, very important. And, members, when we talked about things like whether you burn the bridge or not, I think if you're able to learn, invest into relation, it really brings you far. Third and most important is the humility to learn from mentors and find mentors. All the founders and the leaders that I've learned with, I can actually tell you a list what they really taught me in. For example, Ritesh, the founder of Foyo, I think one of the best person when it comes to building relations. I've not seen a person who can do better. He will meet somebody for the first time and you'll feel that he knows him for the last 5 years. Going into Unacademy, Gaurav, I think he's made me a far better professional in the last 3 years when I worked with him. Third, I worked with Shashank today. A person who can really see how's the bigger impact that you can create. He can actually think 3 steps ahead of what you are. When I'm able to work with them, pick up those learnings, and obviously going back to Airtel, all the leaders that I've worked with tell you how leadership is all about. So I think the third aspect, if you're able to continuously learn from the people that you work along with, it makes you a better professional versus saying that I know it all. So the first was the ability to take up challenges and not being constrained to your comfort zone. Second, investing in relations with teams, people that you work with. Third, always be open for feedback, learn from mentors. Every leader will teach you something. If you're able to do that, that actually helps you excel in your career or grow in your career. But this journey, even if you ask me today, I think it's not even half done. This learning has to just continue, keep going up. And then only I feel that I've at least achieved something. Right now, not even the start of the journey.
Do you think they will ever come to a point where you finally feel like, okay, I made it and okay, I'm good, I've achieved everything?
I don't think so.
I don't think it happens.
It's not. And I think, and again, one of the mentors gave me a quote one day. A lot of time what you say, right? You might say, let's say both of us are podcasters. And I might say, what do I need to do to be better than Anup? Oh, Anup is doing better than. Why do I need to compare with Anup? Why don't I compare with Mr. Beast or somebody else globally? Right? I remember in Mondelez, and the day I was saying something that, this person done this. The person told me, you know what? Dhoni is your age. Why don't you compare yourself with Dhoni if you have to compare? Be happy with what you're doing. And just ensure that you do better than what you did yesterday. We very conveniently create benchmarks which are very close to us.
But these are double-edged sword, because comparison is a gateway to sadness and depression, right?
And that's why just focus on your own growth, focus on your own learning. Be a better person today than what you were yesterday. Trust me, everyone has their own path. There are enough opportunities, growth available. Invest in relations and continue growing. That's what I believe.
You name these 3 leaders, and these people are quite popular globally. So have you noticed any one pattern that is common in all these 3 people that you think every people should try to build within them?
I think one, and that differentiates them from people like us, is the ability to see the larger picture. Right? Whatever we might say, one thing common between these 3 leaders is the way they look at the problem statement, the way they look at how big it could be. I think some of us need to learn far, far more on that.
Now let's also talk about the mistakes, because I think you would not have come here without making any mistakes.
Agree.
Any particular mistakes that you are comfortable talking?
I think one of the mistakes, and that even came back to that point where I said people should not move very quickly. And that's a mistake that I learned from, and I did that, is whenever you pick up a new opportunity, I think my first 1 or 2 moves is, do not give yourself a plan B. Do not give yourself an exit route. Second, do not judge the new place very early. And that is some mistake that I've done in the past of saying, one, judging the new place, because you would have come in from a particular set where things work in a particular fashion, or you said, oh, there could be a plan B that happens. The moment you overcome these two, and that's what I did in my career of saying in the last 4-5 years now, one, if I've decided to take up an opportunity, there's no plan B for me. Second, things will not work out in the first 1 or 2 months, but that is how the pattern is. With every passing day, you will get hold of things. If you're able to do that, that's what actually helps for the long run.
Since you like a lot of challenges, and according to research, an average age of a successful entrepreneur is 45. Will we ever see Jagnoor starting his own venture? And I think I've already started one. Have you initiated any startup in the
No,
past?
I have not.
Okay.
But
Bad on my research. So yeah, again.
will I say no to it? No. But again, if I find out, if I come across a problem which I feel is very big solving for, and I feel I'm the right person to solve that problem, I have something which could be different from others in solving for that problem, why not? Well, that might come in during the way. But again, it will not come in from the say because I want a CEO founder tag, as you said. It will come because I feel I can create an impact, and that is where I'll do that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of I feel India has a much better culture when it comes to celebrating a failure. Do you think, am I stating it right, or you want to course correct it?
For example, if I
For
give an
example,
example.
I think one of our research gave us the data that a lot of successful, around like 55% of the successful entrepreneurs in India are second-time founders. And when I compare it with my home country, I think there is a fear of what society will say, and I think these are the general fear that everybody suffer. But then, do you feel like, even if obviously it might be hard for you to compare it with Nepal and India, but then if you have to compare between different cities that we have been, do you feel Bangalore appreciate failure much more than Punjab? Because that's a bigger reflection of our country, right?
I think, let me go back to the example that I gave you for a manager like me, and similar is for a founder. You can only be a great leader or a great founder if you're not insecure about yourself. And I'll tell you the reason I say that. It is actually reverse of what you said. I have seen some great founders who could not, the first founder did not work out, and they actually went to a corporate job and become a great operator for 5 years. And then they found the right opportunity, again went and did that. The way when I talk to these founders who we generally say, let's say, failed in one of the ventures, is they pick up the learnings from them. And we generally feel, even if you'll talk to investors today, they will actually end up investing in founders who've done a second startup versus a fresher one, because irrespective of failed or a successful, it comes with a lot of learnings for them. And I was actually interviewing a founder who wanted to come back to a corporate career a week back. And I told him, I have a lot of respect for you. And I don't want to judge you on your skills, because it took a lot of courage for you to leave a job and get into a startup. And your ability in the last 3 years, the problem that you have solved would have been at least 10x more than the problem that I would have solved. So in our community, we actually respect them a lot versus actually judging them. Because did I have a courage of starting my startup in the last 15 years? No, the person did that. And if person was a founder, person would have solved 10 more problems than the problem that I solved for. So if there's any word I can use for them, I have a lot of respect for them. And if given a chance, we generally encourage them to come and join our teams, problem solve till the time we are able to keep them excited for 4-5 years. And they might want to go and do another startup. And if they do another startup, I would again invest in them. So I think if there's anything that we should word that we associate with these founders, we should only associate the word respect, because they had the courage 10x more than us. They have learning which is 10x more than us. And there's nobody who judges them for that. If somebody judges for them, please do not care of the person judging for that.
So Jagnoor, I think at the end of the day, any person would really be able to perform in whatever he or she does if the clarity comes from inside. If the person really knows what he or she wants to do. Clarity not as in like figuring out whole life that what you want to be, but at least a clarity in terms of day to day, month to month, or year to year basis, or even say like which muscles do they really want to build this year, right? And I think with clarity, it's not just a growth professionally, it's also a personal growth. So, for my question is, how do you see happiness? How do you see peace? How do you see balance in life? And what's your overall approach to living a good life? Right? At the end of the day, these are the recipes of success, regardless of what you do. Today you are in health tech. Tomorrow you might, even if you are working for a space company, it's the same Jagnoor that you bring into the table. So, are you understanding me? Are you getting my question?
Yeah, fully clear. I think what's more important to be a successful professional, it's even important that you realize what gives you peace on the personal side. For me, one thing that I've been blessed with, a very, very supportive family. I have a wife, I have a daughter, and my wife has been my pillar of support for the last 15 years. And you were asking while we were, before the podcast, you were asking me a question that, how do you put in these long hours in? And I would not just long hours, ability to travel across the country, worked in Bihar, every 2 years, change my base city for a growth. If there's an industry change, a city change, you can't do that if your wife doesn't support you into that. And I think for me, she's been my biggest pillar of support. Once you realize that, you even realize what matters to you is your family happy or not. So if you're able to take both the things together, right, you're able to do justice to the job that you're doing, with doing whatever it takes to solve for that cause. At the same time, solve for peace at home, solve for ensuring that your family is taken care of, you spend enough quality time with them, then it makes a combination which makes a career longer. I've seen things in the past where people will not value one of the two during a stage and then the careers get derailed. For me, that's been always very, very more important. And I was giving an example, there could be a quarter, which could be very limited time I spend with my family in, but then I ensure at the end of quarter, I take them on a vacation where those 4 or 5 days is only spent with them. That solves for my personal life, that solves for my peace, and you balance that out. Or it could be today, let's say if there's a day, I'm 6 days, I'm completely in office. On the 7th day, it's important for me that I take my family out for a dinner or a party. I can't tell them that, no, today I'm very tired, I don't have time for you. What you need to important is you need to balance both these aspects together. If you're able to do that, and this matters to you, then solve for it. But if the piece for someone is external, right, and that's what we talked about in the podcast, it is monetary, something else, it does not help. You should be very clear what matters to you, what professional growth means for you. How do you want to go into a job doing, and at the end of the day, did you do justice to your job today, right, whatever time? At the same time, are you able to give a quality life to your personal, which is your family? Are you able to spend enough time with them? Then you're not looking for, it doesn't work like this, that, I'll do this for 5 years and then I'll spend time with my family. I'll do it for 5 years, then I'll spend time on my personal traits. And I keep saying this third aspect is even, right? Why are we sitting here? Why are we doing this podcast? It's because the third aspect for me is one urge of how do I give back to the society now? A lot of learning that I've picked up in the last 17 years, all thanks to the mentors that I've worked with, nothing that Jagnoor originated in. And as you said, I came from a small town like Patiala, right? There are not many people who could guide us on how to build a corporate career. If these all professional founders have taught me something in the last 17 years, how do I go back and pay it back to the society through the podcast, through a YouTube, through whatever it is? If I'm able to balance those three, I'm doing justice to the job that I do on a day-to-day basis. My family is in a space where they are comfortable, happy, and I'm able to do things that I wanted to do, which is giving back to the society. Then I'm more at peace where I'm sitting today. I'm not waiting for a fact that 10 years down the line, I would want to do a podcast. 5 years down the line, go back to my daughter and spend time with her. Or today, I'll only spend time on my personal time. 4 years down the line, I'll bring my career back on the track now. If I'm doing justice to all these three, I'm very peaceful in the position I'm sitting today. Mm. I'm living my life to the fullest today. I'm not waiting for something to change in the future.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jagnoor. It was wonderful talking to you. I have my own, sometimes what happens is you record a podcast because you want to create a content for the audience, you want to help them, but then you end up taking so much out of this conversation that you come out of these 2 hours of conversation as a better person, or let's say with more clarity in whatever you are doing. And this has been one of those podcasts. I enjoyed it. And I don't know if I was able to do justice to the amount of knowledge that you have, but I'll find out a way to have you on this podcast again. It was a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, best wishes for everything. And what you said, You're quite active on LinkedIn. I'm amazing content, and hopefully we'll get to see the video side of you more often.
I'll do that. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to taking these messages to across. I think a great following in Nepal. I think it's huge potential. So if I'm able to impact the life of even one youth who could take a better decision on a career, I think it's privileged to do that.
Thanks
Thanks
so
a lot.
much.
Thank you, Anu. Thanks a lot for your time.
For everybody who is watching this, if you have watched this far, kudos to your patience. There are tons of takeaways. As we have always been saying, get inspired, become a doer. We talk about these ideas, and I think we talked about too many ideas. And even if you pick up one, implement it, and then act on it, I think that's how you become a doer. And we have been saying this for the last 6 years. Get inspired, become a doer. Inspiration will not do much unless you implement something on it. We'll be back with another amazing episode. I hope you are loving this series of my Bangalore to Doers Goes to Bangalore. Please like, share and subscribe, and that's how we grow. I'll be back again. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.